Today we'll be recapping the 2019 psychological horror film, The Platform. The film uses a handful of unique ideas to comment on larger issues, and has several mind-blowing twists towards the end. Spoilers ahead, let's begin. The movie opens with classical violin and warm colors. A well-dressed elderly manager walks through a busy kitchen, carefully inspecting different sections of production, making sure the food is being meticulously prepared to perfection. Gordon wakes up and finds himself in a concrete cell with the number 48 written on the wall. There's a pit in the middle of the room with countless levels above and below, each housing 2 inmates. He tries to talk to the people below, and his inmate Trimagasi says he shouldn't talk to them as they are lesser, and that the people above won't listen as they are higher. He learns that Trimagasi has spent many months at the facility called the Hole, and they will spend 1 month at each level. Suddenly the lights on the wall switches from red to green as the platform lowers, filled with food that has clearly already been eaten. Trimagasi gorges himself into the food without wasting a single second, while Goreng finds it disgusting, picking out an untouched apple for later. As the platform lowers, the temperature in the room rapidly increases until Goreng throws down the apple. Later, Goreng tries to make small talk, explaining that he volunteered to be in here in exchange for a diploma. Trimagasi tells him he's surprised Goreng is here voluntarily. The next day, after Goreng refuses to eat again, Trimagasi comments that Goreng should be grateful for being on 48. Afterwards, he tells his story of purchasing a kitchen knife sharpener called Samurai Max after seeing it on a TV ad. Supposedly, the knives are so sharp it can cut through bricks. The day after purchasing, he sees another ad on TV about a knife that could never go blunt and could also cut through bricks, even having the ability to sharpen itself as it cut. Out of anger, he threw his television out of the window, killing a man, forcing him to spend 12 months in the hole. He also explains there are at least 132 levels as he has been there. Every inmate were allowed to bring one item to the hole, and Goran explains that he brought the book, Don Quixote, about an idealistic lowly noble that attempts to revive chivalry, refusing to see the world for what it is. With a smirk on his face, Trimagasi says he had brought the Samurai Max Plus. On the third day, Goran finally swallows his pride and begins to eat. On the fourth, a man is seen falling down the shaft. Goreng is shocked, but Trimagasi seems indifferent. Goran calls him out, saying he must have cannibalized on his cellmate if he had survived 132. The conversation is interrupted when a silent woman revealed to be Miharu is seen riding down the platform. Trimagasi explains that she kills her cellmate before riding down each month looking for a child. After descending, 2 men is seen grabbing Miharu, but she easily overpowers both. Trimagasi then explains that he and his last cellmate survived by feasting on a corpse that fell. In the following weeks, Goran begins to adjust to life in the hole, ignoring those above and below and befriending Trimagasi. The last day before the reassignment of cells, Trimagasi tells Goran that he likes him, but he doesn't think he will survive very long. The next morning, Goran wakes up fully tied to his bed. He looks at the wall. They were both assigned to 171. Trimagasi explains that he is tied up as a precaution, as he is younger and stronger than him, but then goes on to say that Goran is like a snail and will be harvested to make escargot on day 8. They hear screams all around them to the sound of people discovering the floor they've woken up on. Over the coming days, hunger drives the two mad, and on day 8, Trimagasi finally begins to cut into Goreng. Miharu happens to be on a descent. She bashes Trimagasi's head and frees Goreng. He springs onto his feet and begins brutally stabbing Trimagasi. Miharu feasts and teaches Goreng to do the same. Goreng passes out and shows hallucinations of him feasting on the rotting corpse of Trimasi while he taunts Goreng. The movie cuts to the manager scolding his employees for a single strand of hair he found on a cupcake. Goreng is awakened by a sausage dog on top of him. He sees he is now on floor 33. His new cellmate is a woman named Imiguri, and her dog Ramses II. She calls Goreng by his name and comments that no one has ever brought a book into the hole before. The scene flashes back to an interview between Imiguri and Goreng, with her being the interviewer. One of the questions were what Goreng's favorite food was, in which he replies escargot. She explains that the hole's official name is Vertical Self-Management Center, and there are 200 levels in it. She had also volunteered to enter. When the food arrives, she creates 2 plates and asks the ones below to do the same so everyone gets food, but they ignore her. In the coming days, she continues to try but is ignored. Goreng gets fed up and tells them that if they don't comply, he will defecate in their food. The platform descends with Miharu on it, but she's unconscious. They lift her up onto the bed. The next morning, the dog is found dead and half-eaten. Imiguri explains that she selected Miharu 10 months ago, but she came without a child. She explains that she has cancer and came to try to help the people here. The next scene, we see chefs carefully preparing the escargot at level 0, which Goreng finally sees. The next day, the two wakes up on floor 202. Imiguri has hung herself. He begins hallucinating, Imiguri telling him that it would have been easier for her to jump, but she wanted to leave him a gift. Trimagasi also appears and begins taunting Goreng with a verse from the Last Supper, where Jesus tells his disciples to feast upon the Son of Man and drink his blood to receive eternal life. Trimagasi tells him with the Samurai Plus, it will be like slicing butter. Goring abandons all resolve and gives in. Goring suddenly wakes up to the sound of a man yelling. His new cellmate tells him his name is Barat, and he is on fire. It has been a month, and miraculously they are on floor 6. He's trying to convince the ones above to let him up with his rope. They pretend to let him up, only to drop him, almost killing him. Later that night, Trimagasi tells him he has adapted amazingly well and only has 1 month after this. Imagori shows up but doesn't say anything, and Goring is reminded of her dream for change. Goring walks over to Barat and tells him he wants to ride down the platform and ration out the food, but he needs his help. He theorizes if they can get food to the bottom, they will break the system. He also explains that he's been counting the seconds on floor 202. He calculated there to be 250 levels. Barat says only a lunatic would leave level 6, with Goring replying, 2 lunatics on fire. The next day, the two make weapons out of metal bars from their beds. They meet 2 of Barat's friends, but Goring says the first 50 levels should not deserve to eat, as they eat every single day. They angrily begin calling Goring the messiah that takes food from people's mouths. Barat begrudgingly hits his friend that tries to go for the food. They travel downwards, threatening to hurt anyone that attempts to go for the food. They are often met with resistance, going as far as killing to protect the food. Further down, they meet a man in a wheelchair that supports their mission but has some criticisms. He explains that they need to send a message to the administration, or their efforts will change nothing. They plan to do this by sending a symbol in the form of an untouched dish that gets sent all the way back up, a panna cotta. As they reach level 50, they begin handing out food as planned. Although this seems to work at first, problems begin arising as they descend further down, with people begging for more. As they provide food for a feeble man, his cellmate explains that he'll slice open his belly in a few days and eat what Goring had fed him. They pass several levels where no one is alive, and notices that the platform does not stop on these levels. They see 2 people beating Maharu and tries to rescue her, but they were too late. In the process, Ballarat is gravely injured. To their horror, the platform does not stop at 250. Goring realizes as the platform doesn't stop when no one's alive, he had underestimated his timing. There was no food left, and the 2 are critically injured. But most of the inhabitants at this level are long gone, so the 2 could only sit silently as the platform carries them down. The platform finally stops at floor 333, but just as they're preparing for the rise up, they notice a child and get off the platform. They see that she is hungry and gives her the panna cotta. Later that night, Trimagasi taunts Goring for wasting his place at level 6, but Goring comes to the revelation that the little girl could be the message. He goes to tell Barat, but he has passed away in the night. The next day, Goring helps the child onto the platform as it descends further down. Trimagasi comes out of the darkness telling him that his journey is over. What remains on the platform should just be the message, and Goring steps off. Goring and Trimagasi walk away from the platform together, with Trimagasi smiling and saying she will succeed. The 2 watches from a distance as the platform begins quickly rising up. It is difficult to explain the meaning of this ending as it's very open-ended, but a couple of key details to note. The biblical implication of the existence of 333 levels means that there are 666 people, providing the whole with a direct comparison to purgatory, with the people there being punished for their sins. One interpretation of this ending is the girl representing life of a human being and hope of a new generation, and that she represents the idea of people in the whole working together to beat the system. But a bleaker interpretation is that although the girl does make it to the top, ultimately it wasn't through the idea of spontaneous solidarity that Imagori talks about, but rather than the efforts of Goring and Ballarat to make a difference. As Goring watches the child divinely ascend the levels in the end, it is a metaphor for Goring dying in peace, believing he had made a difference. But is ultimately futile as the system itself is truly broken, with there truly not being enough food for everyone. But as the director of the movie tells us, the end of the film is up for interpretation. What do you guys think the message of the girl represents?